This episode of Brains on Games is a preview of a game that's about having the best feast of dim sum. Welcome to Brains on Games. I'm Dr. Brian McDonald, and this episode, like I said, we're going to talk about a preview, a game that's coming up on Kickstarter very soon. As soon as I know what the link is to the campaign, I'll put it in the show notes below the video. But it is a game that's all about having the greatest dim sum meal at a restaurant. It's a game called Steam Up. This is a game that was sent to me by the folks over at Hot Banana Games. It's a game for between 2 and 5 players. You can play a game in about 40 minutes to an hour, and it works for players age 14 and up. Although I think, 12, 13-year-olds could get the hang of this one too. Let's talk about Steam Up. Now, this is a Kickstarter, so the components might change, the artwork, the rules might change a little bit, but even the prototype has great table presence. You can see you've got steamers here full of different food items, and in fact, these are 3D printed, but I know with the deluxe version, I'm told that they're going to be made out of sort of soft, squishy kind of rubber, so they'll be squishy like the dumplings that you're actually playing with here in the game. But before you start working on buying these steamers full of different kinds of delicious food, you've got to choose your player board. All of the players are going to be playing animals based on the animals of the Chinese zodiac. The artwork is fantastic. All of the characters here have different abilities, and they all have a little meeple that goes along with them for the victory point counter. This is from the deluxe edition. It's the loyal customer, the little puppy, and here's the angry rooster. I pulled that one out as well because I thought it was kind of funny. So these are just going to go on the victory point tracker here on the main scoreboard. There's also a row at the top that you might be able to see, and you put a little steamer token on here, and the game is going to end when the steamer counter gets to 0, meaning that in a 2 or a 3 player game, once 12 steamers have been bought, that's the final round of the game. The game will also end if the deck of the little fate cards runs out ahead of time. So I'm going to put this off to the side so that it's not in the way. Okay, so the victory point counter is off to the side. We are going to concentrate a lot more on the actual steamers here and the dim sum that's in there. You've got some barbecue meat buns and some phoenix claws and some sticky rice that you might be able to see. But each of the player is going to be dealt out at random 2 of these player cards, and they're going to pick the one that they want to play for that game. The player cards tell you how many of the food tokens you're going to start with at the beginning and how many fortune cards you're going to get as well. So they've got these great, I even like the Chinese characters on the back of the fortune cards, but these allow you to do various things to manipulate the game. The angry customer here starts with 2 of these, and they might be things like being allowed to buy a steamer from anywhere on the board, or change the positions of the steamers, or being able to take an ingredient out of a steamer, or trade an ingredient from the bag. There's all kinds of things that you can do with those fortune cards, but if you don't play them, if you save them until the end of the game, for every 2 that you have, you get an extra Hearty point on your victory point counter. I'm constantly going to say victory points, but they're Hearty points because you're trying to eat the hearty meal. As you buy the steamers, the items that are in the steamers are going to go on your board, and those give you Hearty points as well. So your first shrimp dumpling, for example, if you're the angry customer, will only give you 1 Hearty point, but if you get 2 of them, you're going to get an extra 2 points on there. So this Lazy Susan is going to be in the middle of the table. This is where we're concentrating the most here in the game. They've got different little, I don't know what you want to call it, this rondelle around the outside, depending on the number of players. So there are 3 little dots on this one. This is for a 3-player game. Whenever I played this game, it was always with 3 players, and it just divides up these steamers into 3 different areas. So if I'm sitting on this side, then I have access to these 3 steamers, and the player who's over here is going to have access to those. So you get the idea. It's going to divide up this Lazy Susan according to the number of players so that everybody has access to a few. So I can only buy steamers if I'm on this side. I can only buy steamers from these 3 stacks. On your turn, you've got 5 different actions to choose from, and you can do 2. They have to be 2 different ones. You can't do the same thing twice in this game. So you might grab a token. You can choose whatever token you want. So maybe you can see that there are a bunch of these white buns here, and that's the one that you're going to pick because that's going to allow you to have access to the widest possible array of different steamers. But once you buy a steamer, it comes off and there's more food underneath, so you don't know what's underneath it, so you might get stuck with some food that you can't use. Certainly by the end of the game, that's something that happens. So you can choose to take a token. You can choose to draw a fortune card. If you draw a fortune card, well, of course, you get one of those red cards from the deck like I showed you. You also have to rotate the board 90 degrees, and that's going to give you access or deny another player access to the steamers that you want. You can play a fortune card, and when you play a fortune card, you activate whatever the ability is on that card. Sometimes there are things that stay on the board until some condition occurs. I think in the last game we played, I had one where I would get 2 extra Hearty Points once I had filled 2 columns, 2 complete columns on my board here, so that I had 2 of each ingredient. And that was not easy to do, the way that the food is randomly assigned to the steamer, so I did have a hard time doing it, but eventually that card stayed out for a few rounds, and eventually I was able to pull that off and get a couple of extra points. If you play a fortune card, you also have to rotate the Lazy Susan 90 degrees one way or the other. And again, you're trying to deny other players or keep certain steamers in your zone because those might be the ones that you want to get, or keep other players from getting something that they're trying to go for. You can, if you want to, discard 2 of these. Now remember, these do have some powerful abilities. These fortune cards, you can discard 2 of them though if you want to take a food token from the middle of the table. So in one turn, if I discard 2 cards and I take a token, I can get up to 2 in one turn, but that's my 2 actions, and then I'm finished. And these things are so powerful, you might not want to get rid of them, especially where they give you some extra victory points at the end of the game. The final thing you can do is spend these tokens to buy a steamer. Well, let's say later in the game I had 3 ingredients, the barbecue bun here, the meat bun, and the sticky rice. I could spend these 3 to take the steamer, and then that just pops off the top, and you can see that there are more ingredients here underneath, and then the items will go on my board, and I would take those Hearty Points and move my little character across. Now, being in last place sometimes is helpful because the fate cards sometimes give some bonus to the players who are falling behind the rest, and that's the other part of the game. At the end of every round, before the first player gets to take the next turn, you have to turn over one of these little fate cards. And sometimes there are good things that happen when you flip one of these, and sometimes they're not so good. Often there are bonuses for the player who's farthest behind. For example, this card says the player with the fewest Hearty Points can draw 2 fortune cards. The next one here is each player may discard 1 fortune card to gain 1 Hearty Point. So it gives you a little bit of an extra bonus potentially, or you might just all the players have to discard a card or discard a food token, and it kind of messes things up. Well, that's what Fate is all about, right? The Fate deck is going to change things around in unpredictable ways. Now, there are 18 cards in the stack. I mean, there are a bunch of cards in the Fate deck, but you take out 18. That's how many are going to be in the stack when you play the game. If you run out of Fate cards, if you're down to 0 and you can't draw another one, that's going to be the last round. So either you buy in our 3-player game, you buy your 12 steamers, then that's the last round, or if you run out of Fate cards. And I think 18, I'm just saying that from the top of my head, that's what I seem to remember counting out. I'll put a little note right under here if I'm wrong when I say that, but that's what I remember counting out. It might vary by the number of players. I can't recall off the top of my head. But Once you run out of fake cards, clearly there's not another one to flip over, so that has to be the last round of the game. What we found in this game, as things progressed, there would start to be, I'm going to move some of the steamers off, there would start to be some empty spaces on the board, and the players were constantly turning things around to get the empty spaces away from them so that they would be able to have a chance to get as many of these steamers as they possibly could and earn some more points. And it was a little bit of it would always become a bit of a tug of war at the end as there were more empty spaces here on the Lazy Susan. So we always found that to be a little funny as we were going through the game. So it is a game that does involve some spatial skills, right? Because you are trying to move things around to make sure that the right steamers are going to be in your zone of the board so that you can purchase them. You're also budgeting and planning ahead. You're looking to see what other people are going to buy. Are you going to be able to get a steamer like this one, for example, that's going to give you a pile of points because you've got 2 of these yellow ones and there's 4 ingredients total. So there can be 2, 3, or 4 ingredients in the steamer. And so this is a really valuable one. This one over here is a really valuable one as well. And you might be really trying to race the other player to grab that before they can get it. Of course, if you're planning ahead, if you're budgeting and you're budgeting your actions, you only get to do 2 things, and you probably most of the time like to be able to do 4 or 5 different things. But if you're budgeting those actions and you're planning ahead, that's an example of an executive functioning exercise. Those are the executive functioning skills, the abilities you need to work towards a goal. So, of course, like many strategy games, this is one that involves those executive functioning skills. You've also got the spatial skills of manipulating this board here so that you're getting the ingredients or the steamers that you want to have in front of you so that you can buy them. So you've got a little bit of spatial involvement, but it's definitely, I would say, very much a game of planning ahead and trying to be organized and efficient in your approach. There are also some, it definitely sparked some curiosity about the cultural elements of the game. So, of course, we're talking about the Chinese culture when we're talking about dim sum. Let me give you just one example. It made me want to kind of read a little bit more about it. They've got these little factoids about, well, why do we do this in the game? And the game is designed like this because it represents something from Chinese culture. For example, the 12 animals of the Chinese zodiac. Well, you've got this lucky die sometimes that you might have to roll based on a fate card or a fortune card. One of the animals also can roll the lucky die. But it's got numbers from 1 to 6, but there's no 4. And the rule book explains that the number 4 is bad luck, so they didn't include it on the die. And if you roll this face up, this blank face, it's a 0. And it never has any benefit to you, but they didn't print the number 4 on the die because it's bad luck. So there's one little interesting thing out of, a dozen different things in that rule book that I thought were really neat. As someone I've only been out, I think I've only been out once maybe for dim sum when we had a friend who came from China, who came for a visit and took us out to a dim sum restaurant. So I haven't been there very often. And so I did learn something from reading the rule book. And it's nice to there's that cultural appreciation, I would say, in addition to the fact that you're talking about food that I think once you get those squishy pieces, it's going to really look like something delicious that you're going to want to try potentially. Maybe the phoenix claws would scare people off, but just reading about them made me think, you know what, I didn't have that when I went out for dim sum. That's something that maybe I would like to try out. So you've got a game it's strategic, using those spatial skills, using the executive functioning skills. There's a lot of, I think, a lot of cultural information in the box, in the rule book. It sparked curiosity for me. It made me want to go and look up some more. What I really like, I think, the most about this game is the amazing table presence of having these beautiful steamers with these great pieces inside, and you're rotating them around on this Lazy Susan. I just think that this is such a cool mechanic to have. I know there are several games now that have these little rondelles in the middle. I think Praga behind me is one of them. But this one with the big steamers, and you're taking pieces out of them, I think that really definitely appealed to the people who came over to play with me, to the kids. My kids came over and played as well. And even the vegetarians they didn't only stick with the sticky rice. Mind you, I should let you know that I lost every game that I played of this game, but I have no complaints at all. I had a lot of fun playing it. The artwork on the player cards is great, like I said. I think that the Lazy Susan with these steamers is going to be amazing once this game gets released to the public, and I have to thank Hot Banana Games for giving me a chance to try this out. If you have any comments or questions, you can leave them below the video. Remember, I will add the link to the Kickstarter campaign in the show notes. If you want to get in touch with me, you can find me. You can email me at brian@brainsongames.ca. Brainsongames.ca is the website. That's where the future episodes will go, and the past ones are up there already. Brains on Games is the Twitter handle and the Facebook page and the Instagram feed, so we're all over the place. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to be notified of future ones, you can head on over to YouTube and click that subscribe button. Thanks for joining me. Hopefully I'll see you next time.